I always thought love would make the worst moments softer. Turns out, it can make them sharper, like stepping on glass you didn't see because someone you trusted told you was safe. I was driving back from a site outside Northcrest, a long ribbon of highway called Coastal 19, all glare and heat, the kind of sunshine that makes your eyelids ache. Traffic thinned, and then a lifted truck barged into my lane, without a signal. I jerked the wheel, heard the sound of metal screaming. I swear I felt the car spin before I knew it was spinning. The world stuttered into slow motion. Airbag, powdered glass, the iron taste of blood. When I finally dragged the car to the shoulder, my left shoulder lit up like someone had poured fire under the skin. An officer, Reyes, the nameplate said, spoke in a calm that made me want to cry. He kept me anchored while the EMT swabbed at my cheek. The tow truck arrived and hooked the car like it was a dead animal. "You shouldn't drive," the EMT said gently, as if there were anything left to drive. I was 90 minutes from home, and everything that made home feel like a promise. So I did what made sense. I called Lena. 2 years together. Bills split, the mental list of toothpaste and rent, and who took the last coffee pod. She didn't answer. I texted, "Hey, I've been in an accident. I'm okay, but the car is totaled. Can you pick me up?" The reply came 20 minutes later, like a door quietly locking. "Oh no. Are you okay? I'm at lunch with Evan. We already ordered. Can you just grab a ride share? Text me when you're home safe." I read it twice, then a third time, because the first two felt like an optical illusion. Officer Reyes watched my face change and didn't say a word. The EMT asked if I needed the hospital. My cheek stung. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I sent Lena's message to myself, like evidence. Something inside me iced over in a neat, quiet line, and the room, sun, asphalt, sirens went silent. Reyes saw the text before I could tuck the screen away. Not because I wanted him to, but because I couldn't lift my voice to explain why the person who shared my bed had just demoted me to "see you when you're safe." He tilted his head, reading, and a complicated sympathy crossed his face. He didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. "You got someone else to call?" he asked softly. I thought of my brother, Ikenna. 20 minutes from our apartment on a good day, not great with emergencies, the kind who arrives with jokes and forgets water. He would come, sure, but I didn't want pity arriving in a wrinkled T-shirt. I wanted the person who tells you this is our life, not only yours. I wanted Lena. My mind made a thin, ruthless decision. If she needed clarity about what she was choosing, I would give her clarity. "Officer," I said, feeling the new steadiness in my voice like a stage beneath my feet. "In cases like this, don't you sometimes have to notify family? Officially?" He watched me for a beat, then nodded. "Sometimes, if the injured party requests it, if they can't reach their contact." His eyes said he understood the shape of the thing I was asking, without me needing to draw it. I gave him Lena's number and the name of the place she'd posted her story not 10 minutes earlier. The Halcyon Room, a glossy downtown restaurant with glass walls and out-of-season flowers. She'd tagged Evan like a breadcrumb trail. It was almost kind of her. "Sit tight," Reyes said. "Get those cuts cleaned. I'll make sure she gets the message." While he was gone, the EMT dabbed at my face, pulled glittering slivers from my hairline, and told me to breathe slower. I stared at my reflection in the busted side mirror of the tow truck, a stranger wearing my jaw. I thought about the weekend before, the way Lena had smoothed my collar at a friend's party, the way she'd said we when someone asked about the future. How brittle that we sounded on my tongue now. Outside, the sun kept burning like nothing had happened. Inside, I learned what happens when someone you love chooses their lunch over your life. Something folds inside you and does not unfold again. He was gone for an hour and a fraction. Long enough for the ache in my shoulder to find a steady tempo. Long enough for a part of me to hope I had overreacted, that Lena would text, on my way, I misunderstood, that she would crash through the door of the coffee shop the EMT dropped me at and look wrecked with worry, the kind of worry that makes the world bearable again. The door opened, and instead of Lena there was Reyes with a small, satisfied nod. "Notification made," he said. "She'll be here." But the story at the restaurant spilled out of him later, over plastic cups of water. The halcyon room, gleaming with lunchtime money. The hostess, wary around the uniform until the badge said authority. The manager walking him past the white napkins and glassware to the center of everything. To Lena and Evan seated at a window like a portrait. "Ms. Lena A. Kindala?" he'd asked, voice neutral. She confirmed and straightened at the sound of her full name, as if formality were a cold wind. Then his official cadence. "I need to inform you that your partner, Tario Kuye, was involved in a motor vehicle accident. He sustained injuries and is awaiting pickup by his emergency contact. He said the restaurant did that thing crowds do when consequence walks in. Forks pause midair, conversations tucked away like contraband." Lena had asked the right questions first. "Is he okay? Where is he?" But then the wrong one slipped out, sharp as a thorn. "Why are you here? How did you find me?" Professional that he is, Reyes answered. He requested an official notification after his calls went unanswered. Evan pushed his chair back, so quickly it scraped. He asked why she hadn't said anything. Lena's explanation knitted itself into a confession. She had seen the message, decided a rideshare was enough, decided I would manage. The words hung between them and the full restaurant, and he said you could hear a napkin crease. Reputation is a fragile glass. In that moment, I think Lena heard hers crack, and that's when the panic set in. Not because I was hurt, but because the world had watched her choose a lighter thing and get caught. Not fear loss. She gathered the keys, insisted on driving, promised to cook, to clean, to fix. I kept the directions short. I kept my mouth quieter than I've ever kept it. She filled the car with apologies and explanations. How the waiter had just brought the mains, how Evan had been going through a rough patch, how she thought I was okay because I'd said I'm okay. There's a kind of silence that is a gift. This wasn't that. This silence was a room where the furniture had been stolen. I stared out at Northcrest rolling past, the places we knew, the same grocery store where we argued about cereal, the same corner where we kissed under rain like idiots last spring. None of it felt like mine anymore. At home, she performed tenderness like she'd seen in a film. Soup I didn't want, soft blankets I didn't ask for, reaching for my hands too often, eyes searching my face to see if the audience was with her. I told her I needed a shower. In the steam, I watched a line of brown water slide from my hair as the last of the glass dust left me. I pressed my forehead to tile and said very softly no, to what I wasn't sure, to pretending maybe, to the way she had weighed me against an entree and a conversation, and chosen the latter. When I stepped out, the mirror was fog and forgiving. I wiped it clear. My eyes looked older. So did my mouth. Somewhere between asphalt and hot water, I had lost something I didn't know I could misplace. The respect that makes love possible. Morning split the bedroom in two, sun-struck side, shadowed side, and Lena was already in the kitchen, clattering pans as if volume could make devotion real. She plated eggs I didn't want and sat across from me like an applicant. I thanked her and counted my breaths. She kept reaching across the table as if she could bridge the distance with fingertips. "I'm going to my brother's for a few days," I said finally, and watched everything in her hitch. I need space. To think. To heal somewhere that isn't performing. "Tari, no, please. We can talk. Don't punish me for one mistake." The word punish curled my lip. "It's not punishment," I said. "It's recognition. Recognition has a way of calling your bluff." She cried. Not the soft cry that leaks sorrow, but the theatrical cry that uses moisture like a weapon. I touched her shoulder out of a kindness. I wasn't sure we still shared and packed a bag. She followed me from room to room offering bargains, promises. "I'll delete Evan's number. I'll do couples therapy. As if this were about a friend's contact or phone and not the architecture of her choices. At Ikena's place, the air smelled like pepper soup and old laughter. He took one look at me and didn't joke. "Stay," he said simply. "I'll make room." In his spare room that night, the ceiling fan clicked a small metallic metronome. Lena's texts arrived in clusters. Apologies, explanations, assurances that she loved me, reminders of rent due dates as if logistics were intimacy. I watched the screen go dim and bright and dim again and wondered if love could survive the moment when you learn you're the person someone assumes will survive alone. I thought of Reyes' calm and the way he had looked at me like a man watching someone wake up. It's strange how quickly a story can tilt. One minute I was lucky to be alive. The next I was lucky to be awake. A day later, Reyes and I met near the towing lot, where my dead car waited to be assessed and deemed unworthy. We shared paper cups of something that called itself coffee. He told me the rest. He'd walked into the halcyon room, like a storm wearing a badge. The manager tried to shepherd him discreetly. But there's no discreet way to deliver consequence to the center of a room. Ms. Akintala, he'd said, official. Your partner has requested I notify you. He is injured. He cannot drive. He needs you. Lena had gone pale and then pinched with embarrassment. She'd asked if I was okay. Yes, of course. But then, how did you find me? As if being found were the insult. Evan had started apologizing to Reyes for wasting his time and, somehow, to me, by proxy, for not insisting she leave earlier. People at nearby tables had begun paying attention. There's nothing a dining room loves more than a live-action morality play. She said she thought a rideshare would be fine. Reyes told me. She said, you're strong. You always handle things. He shrugged, the motion tender. People say things they don't realize are confessions. And then, like gossip with legs, news had traveled. Someone from Lena's agency recognized her and whispered to their friend, and the whisper became the kind of story that fits too neatly into a mouth. Woman chooses lunch over boyfriend's accident. The worst part was how easy it was for strangers to believe. That's the thing about selfishness. It doesn't have to be dramatic to be real. It can be as simple as choosing comfort and calling it reasonable. Reyes finished his coffee. You want my take? He asked. I nodded. Emergencies are x-rays. They don't create character. They show it. You saw what you saw. I pressed my hands together, so I wouldn't reach for something already gone. Yeah, I said. I saw. On the way home, the city looked over familiar, like a set. I wondered how many people were moving through their scenes with partners who wouldn't show up if the lights went out. You'd think an ending comes with a bang. Mostly, it comes with errands. A temporary sublet with a narrow window and a sliver of light. Boxes that ask questions with their mouths taped shut. A lease with both our names looking like a joke no one's laughing at anymore. I went back to the apartment on a Monday, keys heavy, heart light in the wrong ways. Lena was there, speech preloaded. She talked about mistakes and lessons. She talked about one bad decision and 2 good years. She used the word unfair like a charm against consequences. I was trying to be a good friend to Evan, she said, like that phrase could pull a thorn through without blood. What about being a good partner to me? I asked, and watched the truth flicker in her eyes before her mouth could lie. When I asked if she would have left lunch for Evan if he'd been the one in the crash, she tilted toward the trap and then pulled back with, It's different, the oldest evasion in the world. We divided the life we'd built. My desk, my tools, my books. Most of the furniture was hers. She kept the couch we'd picked together, the rug that always lied about stains, the framed poster we pretended made the place sophisticated. I moved in motions that felt ritualistic. Wrap, lift, carry, breathe, while she cycled through apology, promise, negotiation, anger, and back again. When she called what Reyes had done a stunt, something in me stood up very tall and said, ah. At the truck, our neighbor Mrs. Oladipo held a box and gave me the kind of look that mothers give to sons who aren't theirs. She mentioned Lena had been holding court all week, telling anyone who would listen that I was punishing her, that I was dramatic. Evan had visited twice. The building keeps its own gossip archive. This will be filed neatly. By the time the last box was loaded, Lena tried one more angle. He's fragile right now, she said of Evan. He needed that lunch. I stared at her. And what was I asked softly. Invincible? She didn't like that answer. The thing about being the strong one is people forget you bleed. In the new place, loneliness felt clean. No performance. No eyes on me waiting to be convinced. I set my books in a row like small soldiers and tried to be grateful. Lena's messages came in waves. Apologies braided with accusations. You humiliated me nestled beside, please let me make this right. I stopped replying. A new number in silence. It felt like oxygen. Then the stories started circulating. A friend from university, Chica, texted, "Lena says you broke up because you're controlling about her male friends." Another sent a screenshot of a group chat where Lena wrote about being abandoned after revealing a supposed pregnancy. The words sat on my tongue like a pebble. That would have been the first thing she said if it were true. She would have led with it the night she finally came to my door with flowers and takeout, voice pitched high enough to rattle the hallway. Instead, it came like a last, tired card thrown on a losing hand. When she stood outside the door of the sublet, I didn't open. I texted Ikenna, and he came the back way, and we waited for the long monologue to end. He recorded pieces of it. The way the lie grew scaffolding as it reached for height. "I'm pregnant. We can fix this for the baby." The phrase for the baby has been used to trap people in more bad rooms than I can count. I sent the recordings and the timeline to Reyes and asked, not as a lover but as a citizen, what to do when someone starts rewriting the story and assigning you the villain's costume. He told me to document everything, to be gentle with myself and firm with boundaries, to remember that truth is not a weapon, but sometimes it is the only shield. So I told the mutual friends, not with venom but with clarity. We broke up because of the accident and her choice. She is telling people she's pregnant. I have reasons to doubt it. Here are the facts. 6 out of 8 people replied with shock that tasted like relief. It is tiring to hold on to a lie on someone else's behalf. That night, I slept through until morning for the first time in weeks. A week later, I found the strength to go back one last time to collect the plan I'd stubbornly kept alive and the sweater that felt like a second skin. Lena was waiting in the doorway, sorrow arranged just so. "We can fix this," she said. "Let's see a counselor." It was almost noble how she kept trying to bargain with a past that was already closing up behind us. "No," I said, not loud, not cruel, just no. The word felt like moving a heavy piece of furniture into the place where it always belonged. She tried the pregnancy again, this time with the tiniest tremble as if that would make it truer. I asked, without accusation, when she had learned what doctor she had seen, whether she wanted me to come to an appointment. Her answers were a fog that kept changing shape. That was when I realized how much of our life had been built on assuming the best of her and how little she'd had to prove. I know for a fact she isn't. A message from Evan buzzed my phone that evening. It landed with a quiet thud, the way truths do when they're not trying to dress up. He apologized for the lunch, for not knowing, for enabling a narrative that made me the villain because it was easier. I didn't ask how he knew. The imagination is a cruel director. It will stage 100 variations of a scene you never asked to see. I changed my number the next morning and left security a photo and a warning. The building's front desk guard nodded with the efficient sympathy of someone who has watched more breakups than sunrises. "People get loud before they go quiet," he said. "Then they go." At the sublet, I opened the blinds and let the afternoon find every corner. Freedom doesn't arrive with a trumpet. It seeps in like light. Sometimes I think the accident wasn't a crash at all. It was the moment the mask slid, the moment mercy got measured and found wanting. The car is gone. Insurance confirmed it. A neat little sentence that can't account for the way my hands still tighten on imaginary wheels. The scar along my cheek will fade, they say. Maybe so. I hope the memory does not. I hope it stays bright enough to warm me when I am tempted to ignore small selfishnesses, because the bigger picture looks lovely. Officer Reyes checks in sometimes, not as a cop, but as a man who has seen the inside of people when the outside falls away. Better now than later, he says, and I agree. Better now than with rings on fingers or a crib in the corner. Better to learn that love without respect is just a habit. I move through days that feel like they belong to me, work that steadies me, friends who show up with food without being asked, my brother's laugh sliding under my door like a note. I cook for one, and the pan doesn't feel lonely. I walked past a halcyon room once by accident and keep walking. Some places do not deserve the rent they charge in your head. Lena's last message before the number change was 3 words. You won't forgive. She meant it like a curse. I carry it like a blessing. Forgiveness is not the same as access. I wish her a life that teaches her to show up early and often for the people she claims. I wish myself the courage to expect that from anyone I let close. What remains of the things that were real, my body's insistence on healing, my refusal to be weak in ways that let others lean too hard, my stubborn faith in ordinary goodness. What begins is simple: a quiet apartment, a plant unfurling new leaves, a scar that catches the sun, and the soft, unshowy relief of knowing that when the world goes sideways, I will not have to send anyone a lesson to get them to care. The first real morning of peace arrived with the smell of rain, and the phone on Do Not Disturb. I woke before the alarm, lay there listening to water thread the gutter outside the window, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Neutrality. Not joy, not grief, just a gentle plateau where recovery can begin. By noon, I was on hold with insurance, turning the story into numbers, claim IDs, repair estimates for a car that would never move again, the arithmetic of loss. The adjuster spoke in a kind, sanded-down voice. "Totaled," she said, as if that word could wrap its arms around what had broken and rock it to sleep. I wrote it down anyway. Then came the practical armor. I visited a small legal clinic under a faded awning, the kind of place that smells like photocopier heat and ink. Ms. Akan, a lawyer with soft eyes, a hard spine, looked over the timeline I'd typed with too much care. "You're doing the right things," she said. "Documentation is a paper shield, but it works." She explained restraining orders and reputation harm with the cool precision of a surgeon. "You may never need any of this," she added, "but having it is how you tell yourself you're safe." I nodded, thinking of Lena's voice outside my door, how it had climbed the staircase of the lie until it ran out of stairs. I told Ms. Akan about the rumored pregnancy and the way Evan's message had landed like a stone in a bowl, ripples spreading in neat circles. She winced. "A lie about a child is a theft," she said, "of trust, of future, of the world you thought you were building." On the bus ride back, North Crest looked like it had been polished. People shook umbrellas closed with a satisfying snap. I watched their lives intersect at crosswalks, temporary alliances, temporary distances. We are all each other's weather, I thought. We are all the thing that drenches or shelters. At home, I stacked the documents in a folder and labeled Aftermath, not because I want to carry this forever, but because giving chaos a spine is its own kind of medicine. It started with a message from Zuri, a designer I'd swapped playlists with at a client site last spring. "Hey, are you okay?" She wrote, "Your name is in the group chat at Lena's agency." Somebody posted the Halcyon story. People are arguing about whether it's private or a pattern. I stare at the screen, feeling the odd vertigo of being talked about by people who had sat across from me at dinner and complimented my coleslaw. I hadn't wanted an audience. I wanted, still want, quiet accountability. But news is a dog with its own leash. Zuri called. "You didn't ask for my opinion," she said, "but I'm giving it. We make myths out of harm because it's easier than apologizing. Don't let them hand you the villain script." Her voice made something straighten in me. By afternoon, HR at my company emailed. A courteous check-in that tasted like liability. "We were informed of an incident involving your partner and public misrepresentation. We hope you're safe." I replied with the shortest truth. "I'm safe. I'm documenting. Work remains my anchor." They sent back a corporate condolence that made me snort-laugh alone in my kitchen. The absurdity of it. My private, pulsing heartbreak flattened into bullet points and signatures. Around dusk, the sky over North Crest turned the color of a healing bruise. I walked to Maple Bridge, the place where commuter trains trundle under like patient animals. I watched the river run and tried to imagine a version of the story where Lena had said, "I'm coming," and arrived, hair wild, eyes clear, hands steady. The alternate life felt delicate and far, like a city across the water at night. There, but unreachable. On the way back, Mrs. Oladipo hailed me from the stoop, a shawl around her shoulders like a crown. "I have plant cuttings," she announced, offering a small pot of something green and stubborn. "For my mother's veranda." When I thanked her, she patted my arm. "You don't have to be the strong one every day," she said. "Every other day is enough." I carried the plant upstairs as if it were a verdict in my favor. A week of calm is a dangerous luxury. It makes you think the storm had forgotten your address. I came home late from a job walkthrough, shoulders full of the honest ache that comes from measuring rooms and fixing problems that can actually be fixed. The hallway smelled like rain-damp carpet and someone's frying garlic. There was an envelope on my doormat. No stamp. My name looped in the tidy handwriting Lena used for grocery lists and birthday cards. I stood for a long moment with the envelope in my hand. The way you hold a small snake you think might be sleeping. Inside, the spare keys I'd given her. A short note, returning these. I'm sorry for everything. Please remember I loved you. L. I set the keys on the counter and felt something unwind in my chest. Then recoil. Good. I told the room. Good. But a part of me, the loyal guard dog that always forgives first and checks for burglars later, tilted its head toward the note and whimpered. That night, I dreamed in second person. You are standing in the halcyon room again. You are nobody and everybody. You hear a name, your name, and you can't stand up because you are the chair. I woke at 3:11, heart galloping. I made tea and read the note again. Loved. Past tense, soft edge, too easy on the mouth. By dawn, I had written a letter I didn't send. It said, you love me like a lighthouse loves ships, beautiful, distant, and very good at being seen. I folded it into the folder labeled Aftermath and chose not to become the kind of man who mails metaphors. At work, I presented site progress to Mr. Chun, a client who hates adjectives. He nodded at my slides with the bare minimum of approval. It felt like sunlight. Professional competence is a bomb. The building will rise. The concrete will cure. The checklist will eventually end with a rectangle beside each line. Not every story demands improvisation. Some simply require you to show up and do the next necessary thing until the shape emerges. The number came up unknown. I almost didn't answer, then did, because curiosity is a door that knows your fingerprints. Tari, the voice said. It was Evan, stripped of charm, words cautious like someone moving furniture in a dark room. Can we talk? I walked to the window. Northcrest was busy with a small, faithful task of evening. Talk, I said. He told me about that lunch like a man listing evidence for a trial he wanted to lose. How Lena had minimized a message, called me fine twice in one sentence. How I believe her, because believing her allowed him to finish his salad without becoming a bad friend. He said that after the halcyon room turned quiet and Rhea's words hung over the table, he looked at Lena and seen not a lover or a confidant, but a person who fearfully loved being seen. I'm not telling you this to absolve myself, he added. I'm telling you because I should have asked a harder question in that moment, and I didn't. And because she's telling people a story that is not true. Regarding the pregnancy rumor, he took a careful breath. It's not true, he said. I know because he stopped. I know. He didn't fill the silence with details, and I didn't ask for them. He apologized, cleanly, briefly, and asked if I needed anything from him. Testimony? A written statement? My lawyer's paper shield hummed faintly in the back of my head. If it escalates, I said, I may call. After we hung up, I stood in the living room and tried to feel victorious. I didn't. Vindication has no calories. It cannot feed you. What fed me was a simple choice to put my phone down, lace my shoes, and run along the river until my lungs burned and the bridge lights swam in my sweat-stung eyes. That night, I slept without second-person pronouns. When I woke, I could tell the dream had left bare footprints, but nothing more. Progress doesn't trumpet. It taps politely and leaves you a glass of water. Grief is a handyman. It shows up uninvited and fixes things you didn't know were broken while breaking other. Smaller things you thought were fine. On Saturday, I decided the kitchen drawer that always stuck would no longer. I sanded the swollen wood and re-waxed the rails. The ordinary sorcery of patience and elbow grease. The drawer slid home like a sigh. I called my mother. She lives 3 cities away in a house with a mango tree that thinks it's immortal. I told her the short version. Mothers read between the lines like poets. Come for a weekend when you can, she said. We'll cook and say nothing for hours. In the afternoon, I met Zuri at a bookstore that smells like dust-wearing perfume. We sat in a window and traded silence for easy talk. She slid a slim book across the table. Poems about rivers and leaving. For when you want words that don't argue back, she said. On my way out, I ran into Officer Reyes, off duty in a soft T-shirt that made him look almost delicate. He asked after the shoulder, the sleep, the folder named Aftermath. I told him about the keys and the note and the call from Evan. He nodded like a man watching a patient's fever break. You're almost through the worst, he said. Remember, no is a full sentence. That evening, I cooked jollof for one and burnt the bottom just slightly, that perfect edge between mistake and flavor. Plate balanced on the windowsill, I watched rain gather again, the city rinsing out its mouth. Across the alley, a neighbor practiced violin. He missed every third note and didn't stop. The resilience of that bad music filled me with an affection. So sudden I laughed out loud. Not every repair is visible. Some are the sound of a hinge learning to move. Some are the taste of slightly burnt rice eaten alone without apology. The following week brought a test dressed as a Tuesday. I was hauling conduit maps across the job site when my phone vibrated with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail, the small discipline of a new life. Later, the message, Lena's mother. Her tone was formal, a prelude to a plea. Call me, please. I want to understand what happened. She's hurting. I sat with it a while. There was a version of me, old faithful dog, that would have called back immediately, soothed a woman I barely knew, allowed myself to be auditioned for a role I no longer wanted. The newer version wrote a script. I appreciate your concern. For everyone's peace, I won't be discussing private matters. I wish her healing. I sent it. The read receipt lit up. Nothing more arrived. That night, the building's WhatsApp group erupted. Someone's bike stolen. Someone else's package misdelivered. The small civic dramas that knit strangers into a chorus. I added a thumbs up to the neighbor organizing a camera fund and felt faintly, absurdly proud of participating in something uncomplicated. Later, Ikenna came over with a stubborn bottle of palm wine and a grin. He listened. Feet up on my rug. While I described in new lines, I was drawing like a surveyor staking out a clean plot. Look at you, he said, eyes warm. Learning to say no without giving a lecture. He raised his glass. To boundaries with a pulse. Before he left, we stood on the balcony and watched the city hum. You know, he said, the first person who will test your boundary is usually the one who built the old fence. I knew who he meant. I also knew I didn't need to prepare a rebuttal anymore. The gate was closed. I had the only key that mattered. Sleep came quickly, the kind that feels like falling into a fresh bed after laundry day. When I woke, the word peace was not aspirational. It was descriptive. On Thursday, Mr. Chen asked me to walk him through a change order that would push the schedule by 2 weeks. Sell me the delay, he said. The old me would have over-explained. Apologized for whether or not of my making. The new me laid out the facts. The supplier's shortage, the safety implications, the cost of rushing. He nodded once. Approved, he said. My spine stayed straight for hours after. Work became the place where cause and effect still spoke the same language. Rebar bends according to rules you can learn. Concrete cures if you treat it right. People show up where they say they will, or the schedule tells the truth about them. In that clarity, I heal faster. At lunch, I sat on a stack of pallets with A.O., one of our foremen, who collects sayings like other people collect stamps. You look lighter, he noted, offering me half a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Sometimes losing is a kind of winning we don't recognize yet. I told him about the violin neighbor, the bookstore, the kitchen drawer, the plant that had put out a new leaf like a banner. He grinned. Small victories line up and become an army. He said it like a prayer. On my walk home, a busker played a cracked guitar outside the grocer's. He sang a song about leaving that sounded like staying. I dropped a note into his open case and caught my reflection in the shop window. Same scar, same eyes, but the fatigue was different. Not the heavy-lidded vigilance of crisis, but the good tide that arrives after doing the next necessary thing. That night, I took the folder labeled Aftermath from the shelf and removed a letter to Lena I'd never sent. I didn't shred it. I didn't need to make confetti out of an old shape of pain. I slipped into a new folder labeled Archive. The difference felt ceremonial. Not erasure, not display, just placement. It wasn't a plan. I was downtown to meet Zuri for a gallery opening that turned out to be mostly photos of rain on car windows. Too on the nose for my taste. We left early, laughing at our snobbery, and took the long way to the train. That's how we passed the halcyon room. We stopped without speaking. Through the glass, I could see a couple seated at the same window where my life had tilted. Two people sharing an appetizer, leaning in, unaware of the ghosts watching them from the sidewalk. I expected a punch of anger, a reflex gag of humiliation. Instead, I felt nothing sharp. The restaurant looked smaller than my memory. The room that had once been an arena for my humiliation was. Tonight, just a place with too bright lighting and a menu that overcharged for olives. Want to go in? Zuri asked, mischief in her smile. I surprised myself. Yes. We sat at the bar, ordered lemonade like two kids try on adulthood. The bartender polished a glass with elaborate care. No one recognized me. Not that I would have recognized that version of me, either. The clink of ice, the bitter sour of the drink, the hum of other people's evenings. I let it all pass to me like wind through a screen. Zuri lifted her glass. To reclaiming geography, she said. We didn't stay long. On the sidewalk, she squeezed my shoulder where it still twinged sometimes when it rained. You did it, she said. What? Walked through the scene of the crime and didn't let the crime walk through you. Under the streetlights, North Crest gleamed. I realized the city hadn't shunned me. I'd been hiding from it. Now I stepped back into its current and let it carry me a little. The scar on my cheek itched and then went quiet. Back home, I placed the bar receipt in the archive folder, not as a relic, but as a map. Here's where you learn that places are not curses. There are rooms you can exit. Sunday morning, a quiet that felt earned. I brewed coffee strong enough to wake my better judgment, and sat at the small table by the plant with its new leaf. The city's church bells lugged their notes down the block like buckets of water. I opened a blank document and titled it letters I will never send. The first was to Lena. I forgive you, but forgiveness is not a bridge. It's a boundary. You don't get to cross it. I did not mention the halcyon room or keys on the counter, or a rumor that had tried to turn my life into a soap opera. The letter stayed with the verb forgive and refused to conjugate it into return. The second was to Officer Reyes. Thank you for being the calm that clarified. Emergencies are x-rays. You were the radiologist who read it aloud without flinching. The third was to myself, the version who read the lunch text and felt the world tilt. You did not overreact. You recognized. You did not humiliate. You revealed. You did not abandon. You chose yourself. I printed them, slid them into the archive. Ritual matters. It tells the body what the mind already knows. In the afternoon, I walked the long path by the river. Two kids argued about whether clouds were heavier than mountains. A woman jogged past pushing a stroller like it was a parade float. An old man fed pigeons with the solemnity of a priest. Life continued with, or without my consent. I found that comforting. That evening, I called my mother to tell her I'd visit next month. Bring the plant, she ordered. We'll find it some sun. We laughed. In the laughter, I heard how much of me had survived, how much had grown. On the anniversary of the crash, 4 Mondays and some change, I drove a rental out along Coast of 19. Not to reenact anything, not to scare myself straight, but to look the road in the face. The sky was a clean blue this time, the kind that makes promises and keeps them. I pulled over at a turnout that watched the sea pry open the rocks with its slow, patient hands. I turned off the engine and sat in a hush that is only possible when you're alone with a machine that has agreed not to demand anything of you. I thought of the spin, the glass, the taste of blood. Then I thought past it, to Rhea's calm, to Ikena's balcony, to Zuri's poems, to Ao's army of small victories, to Mrs. Oladipo's plant leaf like a green flag. Grief had burned. The smoke had cleared. What remained was not a ruin, but a blueprint. Respect first, then love. Presence over performance. Boundaries that hum with life. A life that does not audition for anyone's approval. I drove back into North Crest with the window down. Let the wind write its complicated calligraphy on my skin. At a red light, A couple cross in front of me, hands linked, faces bright. I wish them the simple courage to show up for each other when the airbag blooms and the world smells like metal and fear. I wish myself the same for the day when I meet a soft mouth and a steady heart that understands we as a verb. At home, I watered the plant and watched the drop of water find the curve of its leaf and fall. The sound it made was almost nothing, a small, perfect syllable. I said it out loud to no one and to the whole city. Enough. And for the first time since the crash, the word didn't mean stop. It meant full. It was almost evening when someone knocked on my door, a hollow sound that carried memory like an echo. For one breath, my body thought it was Lena again, flowers and excuses pressed into her hands, desperation sharpening her voice. My heart tense like a fist, but when I checked the peephole, it was Mrs. Oladipo, holding a casserole dish wrapped in a faded towel. She smiled as if she had always been my aunt. "Eat," she said simply. The smell of beans and smoked fish slipped into the apartment like forgiveness. She didn't ask about Lena. She didn't ask about the accident. She asked how the plant was doing. I told her it had grown 2 new leaves. She nodded like that was the most important survival anyone could hope for. After she left, I sat with the dish steaming on the table and realized how much a knock can change depending on who stands on the other side. One had been a lie dressed in love. This one was love disguised as beans and rice. My body, still remembering panic, started to unclench. Later that night, I wrote in my journal, "You cannot stop the wrong people from knocking, but you can decide who you open for. And sometimes the right knock is quiet, ordinary, and exactly what you needed to believe the world still contains gentleness." The casserole lasted 3 meals. Each bite reminded me that community can be as small as one neighbor deciding you shouldn't eat alone. And that was enough to remind me. Loneliness is not always abandonment. It can be a pause before belonging returns. The next day, I received a message from a mutual friend, Chinidu, who rarely calls unless it's urgent. "It's over," he said as soon as I picked up. "Lena's story about the pregnancy. She admitted it at work. Said she made it up because she panicked." I sank into my chair, the relief mixed with a bitter aftertaste. Falsehoods collapse under their own weight eventually, but the rubble still bruises. What are people saying? I asked. Some pity her. Most don't. They're angry she used something so sacred as leverage. The agency is moving her off client-facing work for now. They don't want the drama touching contracts. I thanked him, though I wasn't sure gratitude was the right word. After we hung up, I sat in silence, remembering her voice outside my door, trembling with rehearsed fear, promising to fix everything for the baby. I thought about how many futures had shattered in that single fabricated sentence. Not just mine, not just hers, but the unborn lives she turned into currency without blinking. I opened the archive folder, slipped in a blank page, and wrote only 2 words. She confessed. Then I closed it. The folder was thicker than when it began, but for the first time, I didn't feel like it was expanding. I felt like it was finished. That night, sleep came easier. Dreams were lighter, mundane flashes of grocery aisles and train rides. My mind had stopped staging reenactments of betrayal. It was rehearsing normal life again. That was the deepest relief of all. Not just that she had confessed, but that my body finally believed I could stop bracing for the next lie. Weeks later, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, tilting my head toward a faint line on my cheek. The scar had softened, blending into my skin like a signature written in fading ink. Strangers no longer stared. Friends no longer flinched. But I saw every time I brushed my teeth or washed my face. For a long time, I resented it, not because of vanity, but because it was a stubborn relic, proof of a night that had stolen more than a car. Then one evening, something shifted. I touched the scar with the gentleness you'd use on a child's hair and whispered, "Thank you." The scar had been a witness. It reminded me every day of what survival demanded. The decision to see through lies, the courage to choose myself, the strength to leave. Without it, maybe I would have tried harder to pretend nothing had changed. Maybe I would have taken Lena back and folded myself into her apologies like a man crawling into a coffin. Instead, the scar told the truth when I wavered. And in that way, It wasn't just a mark of injury, it was a compass. Later, I sat at the desk of my new apartment, the plant by the window taller now, and I wrote, "Every wound that heals still points. Follow it until you arrive at the life you deserve." I turned off the lamp and let the room grow dark, my cheek glinting faintly in reflection of the glass. For the first time, I didn't look broken. I looked marked, yes, but marked in a way that suggested direction, not damage. Normalcy returned like a cat, cautious, unhurried, willing to be ignored until you were ready to notice. Work days stacked into weeks. Paychecks turned into rent, groceries, and the small luxury of new shoes that didn't squeak. I met friends without rehearsing excuses. We drank beer by the river, laughing at stories that didn't matter, letting the night air braid us together. I found myself leaning back, watching the city lights shimmer, realizing that peace often wears the face of boredom. One morning, I woke late, brewed coffee, and forgot for an entire hour that I had ever been betrayed. When I remembered, it didn't hurt. It felt like recalling the plot of a movie I'd once seen, compelling then, irrelevant now. I texted my brother, "Thanks for everything. I'm good now." He replied with 3 clapping emojis and a voice note of him singing off-key. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Even the scar became part of the scenery. Strangers no longer saw it. Friends no longer mentioned it. It belonged to me alone, a quiet companion that asked nothing except acknowledgement. In the evenings, I watered the plant, now unfurling leaf with arrogance, as if to prove resilience can be flamboyant. I let the violin neighbor's missed notes wash over me without irritation. Flaws had become part of the soundtrack of healing. Normal days, that was the real prize. Not triumph, not revenge, not public vindication. Just the ability to exist without checking my phone for incoming damage. I didn't need dramatic closure. I needed groceries, laughter, sunlight, and sleep. And finally I had them. The final chapter didn't announce itself. It slipped in quietly one morning when I woke up and realized I no longer counted the days since the accident. Life had stopped orbiting around a single night of glass and sirens. The center had shifted back to me. I walked through Northcrest with headphones in, music weaving a private world. I bought bread at the corner bakery, tipped extra because the cashier looked tired, and felt a kind of freedom I hadn't known in years. Freedom not from Lena, but from the weight of needing her. That evening, I opened the archive folder one last time. I flipped through the notes, the letters, the receipts, the documents. Each page hummed with memory, but none of them had power anymore. They were fossils. I tied the folder with twine and slid it into the back of the closet. Not erased, acknowledged, not carried, stored. I sat by the window with the plant, leaves wide, and whispered a promise to myself. Never again will I settle for love that doesn't arrive when called. The words filled the room like incense. Tomorrow would bring new problems, deadlines, bills, the city's endless traffic. But those problems belonged to me, not a betrayal. My scar would fade, but the lesson would not. Emergencies are x-rays, and I had seen the bones of loyalty. I knew now what was solid and what would shatter. As the sky dimmed, I felt no longing for what was lost, only gratitude for what was found, my own voice, my own boundaries, my own future. The plant bent toward the last light of the day, and I bent with it, both of us stretching toward whatever came next. And for the first time since everything cracked open, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt like a man finally, fully alive,